lot of leadership teams, no surprise, that are also very 8-1, 8-3, heavy on that end. So with that, this group, like I said, I think it was almost 40 or so people. We went through the Enneagram introduction. They had an opportunity to take the assessment beforehand, so we're using those results. They went through the self-identification process with the Enneagram training, and so they self-identified after those two kind of data points where they were. But we always say, and I'm going to say it to you too, is that we hold it loosely. We hold it loosely that the more they learn about themselves, the Enneagram, it could change. But this is where the team was right now. So I'm going to pull up that team map, and about 3/4 of the team, just a little under 3/4 of the team, identified as one of the more action-oriented types. So the 3, the 8, the 7, and then many times 1, I would also put into that group, even though according to Enneagram theory, they are in the compliance or dutiful category in this domain, but I see them show up as pretty action oriented a lot of times. So a little less than 3/4 of their entire team fell into the action oriented type, which is, and again, it makes sense based on what they do. And then, so that leaves about 25%, a quarter or so, a little more than that, identified as one of the more relationship oriented types. The 2, the 9, the 4, and the 6. And it might be a mix of the heart-centered that you know of, the dutiful or the compliant stance that you may or may not be familiar with. We don't get a lot into those because it just gets to be, you can just kind of break the Enneagram apart so much and put it into so many different categories that you just kind of it gets overwhelming, especially when you're first learning it. So we don't talk about that in the beginning as much. We just kind of look at action-oriented types, kind of more relationship-oriented. So that's where this team landed. And with that dynamic, and by the way, there was a really a good mix across all of the types. This particular team had somebody in every single type, even if it was just one person, which usually, you've probably heard me say, type 4, 5s, and 7s tend to be the least common types that show up in the type of work, the type of teams, the type of industries that I most work with. That might be different with different industries or different groups. And so, but overall, this group was pretty well, had some representation in all of the types for the most part. The top types, though, for the team by far were the type 1 and the type 8. And again, this is pretty common among teams that I work a lot with. This particular team also had a pretty strong presence of type 7 and type 9, which we're going to talk about. Just brings a really nice balance to this dynamic. So I have 7 strengths of a type 1, high type 1, type 8 team. So a strong type 8, type 1 team presence, or I should say a type 1 and type 8 presence on any team brings a very powerful blend of decisiveness, integrity, and high standards overall. So as a reminder, our type 8s are striving to feel powerful. Our type 1s are striving to feel perfect. There are many similarities. There is a video over on YouTube that I'll drop in the show notes here around, am I a type 1 or am I a type 8? It is a very common mistype, or kind of am I this one or this one? So because they do have so many things in common, they also have some things that they are a little bit quite different on, and we talk more about those in that video. So if that happens to be you're struggling between one or the other, check that out. This combination tends to value very direct, honest, and efficient communication. So we're not sugarcoating a lot of things on this team. There's not a lot of uncertainty. Where do I stand? What should I be doing? Our type 8s will tend to advocate for strength and power and fairness, ensuring that nobody on the team gets taken advantage of. It's very important for our 8. Also, those things are important for our type 1. They're going to also bring some kind of the moral compass of the group, ensuring that there is integrity and ethics and we're doing the right thing. That is our priority. We got to do it the right way. We got to do the right thing. And so the result is a really strong culture of fairness, of accountability, and ethical decision making. Decisions get made quickly on teams with a high 8-1 dynamic. Problems tend to be addressed head on, which is wonderful a lot of times because you get to prevent the unnecessary workplace drama, that uncertainty. Where do I stand? What's going on? They can create a very results-driven, goal-oriented environment. This environment tends to be very disciplined, where teams know what's expected of them. Now, I mentioned we had that high several 7s, several 9s on the team. And when I say several, I would say, let's see here, 5, 6, 7 7s, 5, 6, 7 9s on the team out of this dynamic. And so they're going to bring that positive outlook and infuse a sense of optimism and kind of balance out maybe some of that intensity. They're going to bring more of an open-mindedness. A lot of times, a lot of willingness to be adaptable. So they're balancing some of the 8-1 with those. And then type 7 tend to be natural idea generators. So they're going to bring some fresh perspectives that might help a type 1 or a type 8 from getting stuck sometimes in their rigid processes or kind of the way we've always done it. One of the biggest pet peeves for our type 7 is to hear, well, this is the way it's always been done. They hate hearing that. They want to know, okay, well, what could we try it a different way? Could we experiment? So 7s are going to bring that strength to the table and use as a balance. So we have that. Now, with this dynamic, there might be some potential challenges. And again, I was not able to work for long term with this particular client. So some of these challenges might resonate, some of them may not. This is looking at your team map. Here are some things to be aware of, to look for, to reflect on. So potential challenges of a high type 1, type 8 team dynamic. We have that mix of our type 8 dominance, and then we have the type 1's kind of critical eye. And there's a lot of strengths with that. We just talked about those. There's some caution that also needs to be just look out for. I'm not saying you're doing this if this is your team dynamic, but look out for creating a very demanding, high pressure culture where perfection and strength are prioritized over collaboration and emotional awareness. So that'll be some of that getting curious about your own leadership style, about the team dynamic, if this is similar to your style or your team dynamic. Employees, because of this 8-1 kind of intense, high pressure culture, potentially can feel intimidated. They can feel micromanaged with that critical eye always watching them, and they can be afraid to make mistakes. Both 8 and 1, that there can be a lot of pressure being led by that, being around a lot of people like that. So because the focus can sometimes be on what is wrong, what am I doing wrong? What are we doing wrong? What's going wrong? What needs to be fixed? What needs to be corrected? Sometimes what is going right, and there's always going to be something, can be overlooked. So opportunities to celebrate big wins, but also small wins, daily little wins, can be missed. So when we're heavy with this 8-1 energy, we want to really be intentional about encouraging regular appreciation, looking for opportunities to bring the team together for, collaboration, but maybe also just kind of fun team building, community building, exercises, events, dinners, whatever that might look like for your team culture, to be able to kind of balance that directness with some encouragement, right? The directness has a place. It can be very powerful. It can be very helpful, but also looking for, do I need to dial that back, or do I need to dial it up? So while the type 8 prioritizes strength and action, our type 1s tend to prioritize correctness and logic. So there may be a gap, maybe a small gap, maybe a big gap, when it comes to the soft skills. And when it comes to relationship building, rapport building, that inspires connection and can boost morale. I think it might have been the episode before this, or maybe it was the first one, we looked at the leadership styles of the type 2 and the type 8. This is what I'm talking about here. Our 8s have so many wonderful strengths, and they're absolutely capable of this. They have a tendency, though, to be very action-oriented, to focus on the strength, to focus on the results, and sometimes can forget about the relationship piece, that building a community, building a culture that people feel safe in, feel valued in, and a culture where people want to stay because they feel seen and valued. So that might be the work of our 8s and 1 dynamic here. There can also be potential for conflict between our groups of 8 and between the group of 1. We have type 8 who wants to potentially push boundaries, challenge the status quo, challenge authority, while our type 1s, again, not always every time forever, that will always be who they are, but type 1s typically tend to have more of a critical or rigid way of how things should be according to what the company has outlined, the processes and procedures that have been established already. What is the right way to do something? And an 8 might think, well, what do I think is the right way? And also look to push that status quo a little bit. So there can be some conflict there between those two types. And then type 7, type 8, sometimes, many times, type 1, along with our 3s, we talked about this, are in that assertive, more action-oriented category where they are focused on the future and they are focused on taking action. And so while this has many benefits, can create very successful teams, if it is overused, it can sometimes lead to impulsive decision making, potentially forgetting about the people component, the people who are affected by those big decisions. And the goal can become the sole focus, and the people can kind of get left behind. They can feel neglected. They can feel like their work isn't good enough. It doesn't matter. And so that will be a potential challenge, or just a potential topic, category, area to just assess. Hey, we have some of these tendencies with this 8-1 dynamic. How are we doing here? How are we doing? Are any of these ringing true? Do we need to to dial it up, back? Do we need to make any changes? And so it's just worth kind of slowing down and looking at. We'll talk a lot about how autopilot is actually a wonderful thing that our brain does. Otherwise, we would just never get anything accomplished if we had to be incredibly intentional about every little thing. The problem happens is when we never open up the hood to see how that autopilot is functioning. Hey, let's just take some inventory. Let's assess. Do we need to turn anything off, on, more, less, add anything, remove anything? And then you can close the hood again and go back to that autopilot. But it is important to open up the hood and just kind of assess. So this gives your team some things for your team to kind of reflect on and think about. And it's interesting because we also do surveys with pre-surveys and post-surveys around our events where the team has an opportunity to anonymously give some feedback. And it's interesting because one of the things this particular team said that they appreciated most about their dynamic or how they work really well together, things like we work through challenges really well, was highly scored, was a big category. I really appreciate our results-driven culture. That was another very big topic. They talked about they appreciate the ability of their team to plan and goal set. They appreciated their direct communication. So it's really interesting the things that the team said that they appreciated, how just kind of interestingly, they overlay with a lot of the strengths of the 8-1 energy and the dynamics there. So there was also some, like all of us, there's opportunities for growth, but there were a lot of positive things that the team had to say about the group as a whole, and it's just really interesting how it overlapped with the Enneagram. So with that, I will say we do this team mapping activity, this analysis. We talk more with the host, the manager. We can take this team map and use it in more in-depth leadership development, workshops, programs. And this is something that is a key part of our Dream Team Certified Workplace Program, is using the team map as we go throughout the process and with check-ins and pulling it out to bring Enneagram theory to the real world, and not just the real world, but their team specifically. So if that is something you are interested in learning more about, I'm going to invite you to check out both our workshops and also the Dream Team certification process over at EnneagramMBA.com. There should be a specific link to becoming a certified workplace below here as well. And with that, I'll say thank you for being here, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one.